How did you get to become a music teacher?
Both of my parents are musicians and music teachers.
And I don't think you've posted in a couple months.
So the past couple months, I've been on a game dev contract. It's also under NDA, so I can't post about it.
Those inspirations, how do those work their way into your game dev or the things you're thinking about?
I like to think of inspiration as like a perpetual stew.
Welcome to the Dev Dream Podcast, where we have conversations to keep you and me motivated and inspired to keep making video games and follow our game dev dreams. Today, I sat down with Dryden Thomas, aka Hoof Dryen, who controversially lost a Blackthorn Prod game challenge, who was a former music teacher and is now making his own game full-time, and in my opinion, also has some of the best vibes and aesthetics in all of game dev YouTube. Now, I'm really excited to share our great conversation we had today. If you too enjoy it, make sure you hit that subscribe button just to let YouTube know that you like what you see. Let's get into it. Where does the name Hoof Dryen come from?
Oh boy. Okay, well, Dryden is my first name. That's my given name. Hoof was the first game that I was working on, a Metroidvania. And then worked on that for about 2 years, kind of a learning project. I might return to it eventually. Really liked a lot of the stuff that was going on in it. But as things happen, the current game that I'm working on ended up taking precedence and got some traction. So I figured I'd better stick with that. However, I couldn't get rid of the name Hoof because my initial channel was called Hoof the Game. So I kind of smashed it together. And
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Well, I first discovered your content probably like a year and a half ago on the Blackthorn Prod challenge, where you competed for kind of basically like a very mini game jam, but with prize money on the line. What was that experience like?
One of the most stressful things I've ever done, actually, is 3 weeks of just the most nonstop game development of my life. I was working minimum 12 hours. Sometimes I did 18-hour days on that while I was balancing with my music teaching job. So it was really intense, very worth it, very scary because it was also the most people up to that point had ever seen my work. So I was like, I really, really have to make a good impression here. So it went well.
Yeah. So I went back to that video and I remembered really enjoying the content, especially the sort of devlogs you put that were in the video. And, spoiler alert, if no one's gone and watched it, if they want to, here's your chance to get out. But you didn't win. You got second place. And I went back and checked the top 9 comments, like with the most likes, were essentially saying that you should have won. So in that competition, they implemented community voting, and you were a smaller channel up against a bigger channel. But with all that said, do you remember what it was like coming away from that? Just how much positive feedback you were getting, and what was that feeling like?
Yeah, I mean, it was an incredible confidence booster, I'd say, because coming out of the challenge, you lose a community vote 70-30, and you're like, oh man, when this video comes out, I don't know, maybe they aren't going to like the game very much. And then people were so positive about it. It was so cool to get that reaction and that response, and then to kind of grow my community on making that game that I am still in the process of making. So you couldn't ask for anything better than that.
Yeah, and then kind of just like a behind the scenes, what's it like just working on that challenge? Like, is it a lot of Discord messages or just like an email like, hey, will you make this thing? Like, practically, what does it actually look like being on one of those challenges?
It's there's like a Discord group chat that gets made, and then they kind of say like, oh, here's your next deadline, or here's the next twist that's going to get thrown in the ring. And so you can message the other people in the chat because, we had those kind of midweek twists that we threw at each other. So we had to set up those little meetings on our own time there. But it definitely depends on the challenge, because I've judged one of them too. And that one, the contestants were a lot chattier with each other than they were in the one that I was in. but it just kind of depends, I guess.
Yeah. What was it like putting the judge's hat on? That's super cool. I didn't know you had done that.
Yeah, that might have been worse actually. Uh, because you have to think through, like how can I be as objective as I can
Right.
while judging a completely subjective, well, not completely subjective, but often subjective thing. How do you compare an apple to an orange? Which one deserves to go on to the next round? Um, and maybe like one you feel is a very well executed game, but another one is more to your taste. So you try to counterbalance for that. And it can be very like get lost in your own thoughts. Like, oh, what if I missed something? What if I wasn't playing right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I
it's
think
kind
the
of
biggest challenge. Yeah, I think the biggest challenge for me, if I was doing that, would be trying to sort of discount games that I would play, like, the genre or the art style that I would play anyway, against something that might be just as good or just as creative that might not be my type of game. How did you try to compare an apple to an orange? Did you have any kind of framework or try to keep that in mind, or did you just go in and say whatever I have the most fun with could also be an approach?
Yeah, I mean, so Thomas Stewart, who has been a judge on those several times, has created a rubric. So you kind of can break down like the art aspect versus the sound design, the UI. Can't remember everything that's on there because it's been a little while since that experience. But in the end, you kind of can psych yourself in or out of one of those too, because like, how do you say this one's a 7 versus a 6 or an 8? You're still going off of your subjective preferences, even if you are attempting to reduce that down to a single integer. So it's just as bad if you try to break it down, basically.
Sure. The rubric has to be helpful though. Now the jam that you competed in, the theme was Memento Mori, which means something like remember death. And I was curious, I think a lot of people could be either intimidated by that kind of theme or super excited about it. So, are you a person that's a sort of darker kind of theme? Is that something you're drawn to in your artistry, or was that something that was more scary for you?
I'd say it absolutely kind of resonated with me. The first time I heard Memento Mori was when I was reading those series of unfortunate events books as a kid. There's one, I think it's the Austere Academy, where it's the motto of the institution. And of course, he means it in this sort of tongue-in-cheek, grim-dark sort of way. Remember, you will die. But when it comes down to it, Memento Mori is an uplifting message. It's like, you only have a limited amount of time. Don't waste it. Live life for what you want to live it for. So, but I think the motto really spoke to me. I was able to draw a lot of cool references from history into it, and I already like games that are a little bit on the darker side anyway.
Yeah. I really loved I don't know if there's a newer one or not, but the series of unfortunate events movie they made that I think was maybe Jim Carrey. As someone that's read the books, does that hold up, or is it still one of those that like, no, the movie's fine, but the books are better?
I think the books are better, but it's really difficult to adapt because so much of the books relies on the Lemony Snicket authorial voice. It relies on reading it on this humor through what happens. I think they did a good job with the movies, but I think it's really hard to adapt.
That makes a lot of sense. Do you find those inspirations or inputs, whether it be Lemony Snickets or other things, how do those work their way into your game dev or the things you're thinking about or how you're going to build them?
I like to think of inspiration as like a perpetual stew. Like you kind of throw, maybe somebody listening to this hasn't seen this before, but there's like a thing that I think would be at inns and taverns and stuff. They would just have their perpetual stew, and they would keep throwing in vegetables and other ingredients and meat and stuff, and it would just keep going and going, and it could go on forever, I guess, as long as you kept it hot enough that it wouldn't grow bacteria. So that's kind of how I think of inspiration, that whatever you take in kind of goes into the stew, and maybe you find the ways that that ingredient connects with something you already have, or maybe it modifies what was there before, but you always have stuff to pull from if you're always refilling the well.
Yeah,
Great art.
what things would you say you're putting into the stew right now?
Let's see. Over the summer, I watched the entire filmography almost of David Lynch. So that's coming back in. There's a couple things that I would say have made a really strong impression on me over the years. Like musically, like Radiohead and Joanne Newsom and Bjork have kind of like, they're just there all the time with me. Hollow Knight and now Silksong. I just put 75 hours into that over the last couple of weeks. Could not put it down. Beautiful game. Yeah, just anything that I find that sort of grabs me, I'm like, okay, what is it about this that's grabbing me? How could I connect this to what I'm doing? Do I want to? Does it fit? Maybe I save it for later. I don't know.
Yeah. Speaking of Silksong, there's this interesting conversation that started to happen right as it came out with a lot of AAA devs, being grumpy and that something good exists. But that sort of trickled into the indie community of saying, like, this game's too cheap. We can never live up to this expectation. They should have made it more expensive. I'm curious what you think about that. I have thoughts about it, but I thought that was such an interesting response about, in a time where everyone complains that games are too expensive, that somebody made a great game that's affordable and we're also grumpy. So have you thought any about that at all?
I think it's tough. It does make it possible forever for the comparison, which already existed with Hollow Knight, of look at this masterpiece that's $10 or $15, and now this one that's $20. I think also though that people kind of know. There was a tweet that was posted by the developer of Layers Deep where he was worried about this. And a lot of the people who responded to that were gamers, and they were like, no, we know. We know Silksong is really cheap for what it is. We know that they're able to price it that way because they have a guaranteed gazillion sales, and they were already fully set up from Hollow Knight. Like, people who are invested in the story of those games know that is just incredible value for your money. So I'm not too terribly worried about it, even though it's hard to not compare yourself to it.
Yeah, that's a helpful framework to both say, like, this game can exist and it'd be awesome that it's that cheap, and that not everyone now is going to only buy games if they're that good and $15. Like, there is, more gap that we can fill as indie developers. So good. Well, I'm glad it's not too concerning. But jumping back to the Blackthorn Prod challenge, the game you started there was Disinherited, and you decided to continue that project. How's it going?
I am so excited to get back to it. So I got a very intense summer of development on it. The first thing I did was the 100-day challenge to myself of releasing a video every week while working on it, trying to finish the whole game. But as happens with games, they get bigger than you expect. Also, the community really informed that scope creep. Shame on them. Shame on me for letting them. But I think their feedback has made the game a lot better and larger and deserving of the time to make it that way. So I wasn't sure at the start how far it was going to go, but I think it is worthy of being like the main project now. And it took me to South by Southwest Sydney, which was a really cool experience. And then I was able to do some more development on it. And over the last summer, I have gotten a game dev contracting job. I've done a little contracting in between so that I can support myself for the rest of the development, or until I can fund it, basically.
Yeah, you mentioned scope creep, and I've been kind of workshopping this idea that I'm curious if this is your experience or not. I think there's two kinds of scope creep that are a little bit different. So I think there's one, which is scope creep, which it sounds like maybe this is more what you're experiencing, and just like the game growing and the game adding features. But I think for a lot of especially like solo devs, or especially new people that are gaining skills as they go, there's always I think, and I've experienced this, a second category of like just trying to reiterate on things that already exist and probably could be left alone if I was really focusing on finishing. But there's some sort of, creative obsession or something like this where you make something and then you remake it and you're happy with it. But then a month later, you've either leveled up or you just look at it in a new light and you feel like I need to remake this again and again. Do you experience that at all?
Yeah, for sure. I think if you kind of aren't looking back at your old stuff and going, then you've either stagnated or I don't know, maybe you were at the right level at that time. I haven't reached that point yet where I look at my stuff from a year ago and I'm like, hooray, that was perfect. I got it, nailed it. I don't think quality creep is that bad of a problem because you are in the end making the game better. But I think you have to reevaluate it if it's making your project stretch out longer than you think it should. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe just quality creep is okay, but then also in the back of your mind, sometimes saying, no, this is good enough. And so having some sort of framework to check yourself of like, could I do it better? Probably, because we're always getting better. And do I really need to, maybe based on, I don't know, the goals of your project or, what you're looking at. They also mentioned Southwest, and you pretty rigorously prepared a demo for them. What was it like, and just kind of what were the things you were thinking about in trying to make a fun demo?
So the first thing about the demo was trying to condense the gameplay down to something that could be done in a single sitting and by somebody who didn't know anything about the game, and also that would leave them with good feelings and not frustration or confusion. So a lot of that was just getting the tutorial set in place. I iterated on that tutorial several times, presented it to a couple groups of people who hadn't watched my devlogs or anything like that. And it's always so interesting seeing what people miss from the tutorial and then you have to design around that. So you make it so that it's unmissable for them. And you want to make it so that somebody who gets it intuitively isn't held back. They aren't stopped by the explanation, but you also need to make it so that somebody who doesn't get it so intuitively is along for the ride. So that was probably the hardest part about making the demo happen. And then otherwise, it was like adding like the last few things I did were like the intro area and like amping that up art-wise so that the first impression of the game was like, oh, this is a really neat little space that I'm entering into, or doing a little animated cutscene that explains what the narrative framing of the story is. So you're not just like, who's this guy? Why is he in the catacombs? What's going on?
Yeah. Is it fair to say that Disinherited is sort of a Dead Cells-like with more story?
Yeah, that's one of the things that I really loved Dead Cells.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I was missing an element of story and sort of heart to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think they could have gone further in that direction. I don't think they needed to, because I think the gameplay is really what that game is about. So I'm kind of like borrowing a little bit more from what am I? Oh, sorry. Pause for a second. My dog's barking at me.
You're okay.
We can cut this out, right?
Sure.
Let's see. Go on up. Go on. Go on. Come on. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that.
No, you're totally fine. We got to take care of our little furry friends.
We got it. Yeah. So I really liked the approach within the framework of a roguelike that Hades took. of how it exposes you to the characters over and over again. They have different dialogue options. So that's sort of the path that I want to take with it more. I also played Astral Ascent afterwards, and I love the way they do story. So yeah, bringing that more in. And then gameplay wise, it crosses a little bit closer with like Spelunky or Nine Souls. Spelunky in the sort of like you pick up different tools and you can throw them and they have different interactions with the environment. And then Nine Souls in that it's very reaction based. It's very, you have to like parry back stuff more than just, dive in, wail on the enemies, get out. Dive in, wail on the enemies, get out. That's kind of what Dead Cells or Hades gameplay is more like.
Nice. Yeah, when I think about all of those inputs and making a demo, there's three kind of things that come to the surface of like that I'm wondering how you decided to, kind of gatekeep behind the paid version, and that would be the story and then the areas and like the items you get. So was it just like a time limit or the first area, or how did you go about deciding, because that sounds like a real challenge in that version of game to me, to decide what is in the demo and what's out?
Totally. For the demo version, I was just like, okay, you get the catacombs. And I tried to make the catacombs more diverse and sort of do this building upon the gameplay thing. The first area, the first section, you don't have to worry about your light. The next section, you have to worry about your light. The third area, you have to worry about your light going down and the Reaper chasing you. And so there's kind of a build-up, and then there's the boss of the catacombs, which is Gon the Gravedigger. And then once you beat him, it's over. All the items were in there. In future iterations of the demo, they probably won't be. And you definitely won't be able to kind of progress the story all the way or even close to all the way. A lot of those elements, there's no save system yet, right? So at the moment you drop in, you do your thing. The dialogue is the same every time. It won't be in the final game.
Sure. Gotcha. Now, another part of that South by Southwest experience that you talked about on your YouTube channel was presenting to some publishers. Do you think that is a good experience and a worthwhile time for, let's say, the solo developer that's watching?
It depends on what you want out of it. I think it was a very instructive experience for me. I got a lot of positive feedback from the scouts. They were really impressed with it in general, how much I had done in such a short time, and they really liked it. So that was really validating of an experience. If you're thinking, oh, all I have to do is get together a good demo, and then I go to a place and I show it to some people, and then they're gonna give me enough money to finish my game, probably not. Like, that is a very rare thing to have happen, as I understand in today's publishing sphere. You're much better off, I think, spending that time just working on the game than crystallizing it into something. However, the one thing that was really nice about it was getting the pitch deck together forced me to clarify more things about my vision of the game, and getting it to the point where I could do that and give that speech to somebody in 10 minutes, going through a deck, showing them the things, was beneficial to my idea for the scope of the game going forward. So that was nice. I don't know if it's the best use of time.
Sure. Now, if for some reason you did decide that like publishing for this game is my number one goal, is there anything you would be doing differently in preparation for that compared to this first time?
No, I don't think so. I think I definitely did it right. As right as you probably could do it. And, it either happens or it doesn't, and there's a very small chance that it will. So, just try. If you're in that position where you're like, here's a chance to do it, you might as well. But definitely don't spend a lot of money and go out of your way to try to get a publisher, because it's a very small chance.
That's good to know. Now, something that I think is a recurring theme of praise that I see people giving you all the way back to that Blackthorn Prod challenge is just how good your music is. And I think that, makes sense because you mentioned in your day job that, you teach music and vocals and things like that. What can you give me just a little bit of background on like music in your life? How did you get to become a music teacher? And yeah, just what is music for you?
Yeah, great question. Both of my parents are musicians and music teachers. My mom is an amazing violin viola teacher. My dad is an amazing conductor. He plays trombone. And so I've been very lucky to have that be a part of my life ever since I was able to hold a violin, basically. So I played violin and then viola all through high school. I went to school for voice because I got into singing in high school. Ended up going to school for musical theater. And then after that, I mean, I'd always been composing. And then my goal right after college was like, well, I want to pivot back to that. I'm not enjoying this musical theater thing. I want to be making stuff. And so I got involved with a couple projects in a composing capacity. They fell apart because a lot of game projects, you probably know this, fall apart eventually because you're only as strong as your weakest link, right?
Yeah.
And even despite having made a lot of music for those projects, like, well, there's no project anymore, so that's too bad. And I just composed for about 8 years for various odd things, primarily an early beginner strings program called String Sprouts, which is doing fantastic work. I composed all the curriculum for that. And then I got into music production, did some songwriting, produced for other artists, and finally kind of wound my way back to, well, now I have all these skills. I want to use it in games. So I was like, I'll make a little game, just to do some music. And that was Lighthoof. And now here we are a couple of years later.
Yeah, I feel like you did the opposite of what other people do. Other people say, I'm going to make an MMO and then have to go backwards and make something small. You actually said, I'm going to start something small and then grew the idea, which is also cool. Do you have a favorite music project you've worked on, whether it be all the way back from, more musical theater stuff or your composition?
Oh, sheesh. I really love some of the work that I did with Heirloom, an Australian artist. Their voice is just so beautiful. I love their outlook on the world. I did some production with them. That was beautiful. Some work with Yeva, who's a songwriter, producer in Los Angeles. She's absolutely phenomenal. So smart. I love her songwriting, and she just has this like kind of effortless pop, kind of like dark aesthetic. And then, I'm proud of the songwriter albums that I put out as well.
Yeah, super cool. I think I saw a video, maybe recapping your channel or something, and you've also mentioned it, I think, but just how kind of, initially some of your vision was to be more in the music industry. Was there something lacking in that brought you to game dev? Or, how do you see your journey has transitioned to game dev, which is multiple disciplines all at once, but still obviously uses music as a huge tool for you. How do you think you took that journey to get to game dev specifically?
Yeah, I think what was happening at the time was I was feeling a bit burned out on working on some of the other projects that I was working on, not the ones I mentioned, because those were very filling artistically for me. But there was some like mixing projects and production projects that I was like, these are not what I want to be doing. I want to be able to make something that's completely my vision. And I got this idea back in my head of like, oh, what about games? Like that was the whole point of learning all this stuff. And I was like, well, maybe I could like do sound design for games and transition into a music role. And so I took a sound design class, and then I was like, well, I'll be more useful if I know a couple game design skills, game dev skills, a little programming. And it kind of spiraled into what it is now, which is my whole life.
That's super cool. And yeah, I have a note here that at one point you mentioned in a YouTube video that I think it was Light Hoof, but just your game dev journey started to be just a portfolio piece for music. Whenever you go back to that place in time, could you have imagined what you're doing today and being more full-time game dev?
I think there would have been a part of me at the time that was still sad to leave just doing music behind, because that was the hardest thing for me. I was like, if I start doing this, I won't be doing music all the time. And it's a bit of a hard thing to give up for yourself. But I think I would still make the same choice looking ahead, like, because it's been such an amazing journey. I've been so lucky, to be honest, to be doing what I'm doing, like making basically exactly what I want to make. And there are people who are like along for the ride and like excited to see it grow. Like it doesn't get better than that. So yeah.
Yeah, that's
really
phenomenal. What about music or teaching music do you miss?
I definitely miss the kids. I had some students that were with me from right when I started teaching 4 whole years, and watching them grow and like gain confidence in themselves and see how practicing something results in mastery and getting better and better and just growing into more confident and happy people. I think that's the thing that I miss the most, is the human connection from that, getting to visit with someone for half an hour a week and see where they're at. And just, it's a medium that I cared a lot about. I love music. I love talking about music and imparting knowledge. So, but I still can get some of that from YouTube. It's kind of just like teaching to a broader audience when I make that kind of video. So, yeah.
Yeah, that is one of the really cool parts about YouTube, is that you can put on a lot of different hats, but in particular teaching hats. The community of people that want to learn how to make games is big. And so it's very cool that you're bringing those skills over and just delivering it to a new audience. That's super nice. If there was someone watching that wanted to follow in your footsteps, maybe not specifically from being a music teacher to going full time, but when you think about your journey, is there anything that you think was a really smart decision or anything that really helped you along in being able to do this today?
I think there are some attitudes that are really helpful in something that's such a marathon as game development. One of the attitudes is like, I can do this, but I don't know everything yet. So keeping a sort of confidence along with a humility is really important. Because if you get confident too early, you're like, I don't need to know. I don't need to learn anything else. You just get really defensive. And then it becomes harder to grow into what you need to become. Another thing is just keeping your eyes kind of down. Like, keep in your mind, like, I have great things that I want to create and accomplish, and I want to make big things. But don't think too much about what all that's going to take. Just focus on, like, what am I doing today? What problem am I solving today? And how can I keep building on that? Because it adds up when you do that. And if you get overwhelmed, you're just going to shut down and run away and do something easier, because it's really hard. But you can do this one little thing. You can learn this one little programming concept today. You can make a health system. It's something like that. One thing a day.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges is that concept of, with game dev, is just that there's so much to learn and there's so many varied skills that it would be almost impossible for anyone to truly be like, to have a sort of proclivity to all of them, especially if you're doing programming. I mean, even just programming and art are very different from each other. So what do you think it is about you and just your mindset or your experiences that help you be able to push through that sort of difficult, multi-varied task, and maybe sometimes not being as good as you want to be? How do you actually continue going?
I think part of it is you want to find whatever is the path of least resistance for the day. Whatever you are feeling most excited to try out is probably what you should focus your energies on, because it's going to you're gonna not come up against this brick wall. Eventually you might reach a point where it's like, yes, I do have to implement a save system or something like that. And then you will have to do that. But there will also probably be a time during the course of the development where you're like, that's what I feel like doing right now. That's what I'm going to tackle. So if you're feeling frustrated with something, switch gears to something else. As a solo dev, I find that's the most helpful thing.
Yeah, this is reminding me of another conversation that I've had on the channel, and I was telling, I can't remember which guest it was, about I had watched a Hank Green video, the science personality for anyone that is not familiar, but he was saying he tries not to follow his dreams, he follows his tools. And I thought that was a really interesting framework because I do think dreaming is valuable. I mean, I don't think you can do game dev without at least a dream of being able to share something. But I did also find it to be helpful to be like, okay, what are the tools I can, maybe another way of saying it is doing whatever feels like it's kind of downhill, doing whatever skills you're a little more acclimated to. It sounds like there's a super common thread that you're saying there too. That's maybe just another way of saying it. Would you agree with that? And how do you think about, keeping in mind the big dream or maybe not?
Yeah, I fully resonated with that. I actually saw the Hank Green video when it came out. I watch him pretty frequently. And I really was like, yes, Hank, yes, that exactly. I know what you mean. There is a point where you should get excited about putting new tools in your toolbox. But I would also say that a lot of what I've made has been using the tools that I was closest to adding to my toolbox. Like I really liked drawing in high school. So I picked 2D hand-drawn over pixel art, which would have been a newer tool to add, or 3D, which would have been a lot of very new tools to add, because I felt like that was kind of the one that was like closest to reach. Same with kind of the overall aesthetic of the game, is that the games that I've chosen to make have been most similar to the kind of music that I really enjoy and like making, as like that's my wheelhouse, like this sort of romantic, classical, moody vibe is really where I live. So that's why I choose what I choose.
Yeah, I've been trying to implement that more just in my life in general. I think I'm accepting more and more that I'm a creative person. For some reason, when I was a kid, I locked myself like I'm whatever is not creative. I had this idea that I'm a analytical, non-creative person, and I am that some, but I'm really growing into my creativity and realizing that I actually am a little bit of a big dreamer, and then trying to channel that into like not just dreaming, but maybe doing the next step. So I'm enjoying getting people's thoughts on this. It's very helpful. Thanks for sharing.
What would you say you're growing in the most right now? Like what skills are you fostering?
Yeah, I think the biggest one, just in a general sense, and that game dev especially has fostered in me, is the ability to fail with no failure. And that's sort of very broad and generic in general. But I think I'm learning this because my wife is the opposite of me, and she's very afraid of failing and will not try something that she doesn't think she can be good at. And I've come to this place where I think YouTube also has helped me. I've tried a couple YouTube channels that just were total flops, but just coming to a place where now, like where with this podcast, for example, it's a new creative endeavor. I'm talking to people I've never met before. And something that I've come to a place with is that like people don't remember failures unless you're the one that failed it. And so like if I post this video and no one watches it, guess what? No one watched it. Like no one is going to even see my failure. So I think for me, yeah, my like super strength that I've developed in this season of life is, yeah, truly just I can jump on whatever creative endeavor I want, and it's okay if it's not perfect, and I'm not gonna eat myself up over it. So I would say that.
100%. And you still gain something along the way from making that. Mm-hmm. Like me and my friends have a joke, or my friend, we have a joke about the video that I made that I spent so long researching. It was like 3 weeks of like backbreaking writing. I was like reading psychology papers and like watching every video everyone had made on the subject, and like took so long to write and edit, and then the joke was like, it will never hit 1,000 views. And it didn't, and that's totally
Right.
fine, because I think I learned a lot from the process of making it, and nobody saw it, so it's fine.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So literally no one even knows to remember that you failed, which is great.
Exactly.
And it's a little bit cheesy, but like, I don't know if you read Brandon Sanderson, but one of his mantras on one of these fantasy books is journey before destination. And it's just the concept of like the thing you do matters more than the outcome you get to. And I think when I look back on the early things I made when I was fresh out, it was always because I aspired to not work a day job, basically, which is still, I think, okay to aspire to want to live in a non-conforming kind of lifestyle. But I was always doing every creative endeavor with some output in mind. And it was never just for the sake of making a thing. And the thing that I'm already really loving about this podcast is I actually just am finding that I love chatting with game developers. So like I would just do this part even if there was no output. Like I would make the time to do that. If people would sit down and just chat with me, like I would actually be willing to do that. And I just get so energized from that piece. And so what happens from that is, whereas, editing, I don't really like editing videos. I sit there and I'm like, I got to crank out this video. But because this project, there's at least part of it that I just would do. It's actually really helpful. So do you find any things in game dev or YouTube that are either of those spectrums where like this is the thing I would just do versus like this is the thing for the things I want to put out in the world has to be done?
I'd say editing is for me also same situation.
Yeah.
It's drudgery to me. It's important that I do it because I have all the knowledge about the project. It's important that I am expressing what I want to express in the video, but I'd just love to skip it sometimes. I like writing. I even like the recording and delivery, but finding B-roll and putting it in is like anything but that, please.
Yeah. Would you ever hire an editor if you got to the point, or do you think you want the creative control enough that you'll power through regardless of how big you get?
I'm not sure. It's certainly an attractive thought to have somebody else do it, but I'm just not sure. It would also be hard to let go of the control over the final product. So, and just the way that I edit and do videos is very compressed. I push it all down into 12 hours. It's grueling. I couldn't do that to somebody else. So it's probably better that I'm the one who suffers.
Sure. The rest of my questions are just like a super random kind of slew of questions, but this conversation right now transitions into one of them, in that you've done a pretty classic YouTuber thing, and I don't think at least game dev YouTuber thing, and I don't think you've posted in a couple months. Is that just because, and I really think that's so fair, because game dev alone, as we talked about, has so many different skills and inputs, and then YouTube, I think you could argue, has as many inputs when you're talking about scripting and editing and recording and lighting. And I mean, also like so many things. So I was just curious your experience in trying to keep up with all of that.
So the past couple of months I've been on a game dev contract. So I haven't been working on my game. It's also under NDA, so I can't post about it. And I was thinking maybe I can fit in some of my own work, but I just cannot multitask. If there's a problem with the other game that I haven't solved yet, which there was a lot, because one of the reasons this contract was attractive to me was it was a good excuse to learn multiplayer and mobile platforms and just a whole slew of things that I had not touched before. Totally different game design, art style, everything. And also paying off the debts that I've accrued from the last couple of years of spending so much time learning game dev instead of doing something that makes me money. So that all of these things combined that made it so that I couldn't release a video during that time. I think that's okay. I'm hoping that returning will be as good as it has been in the previous year. I'm nervous about it, of course, but Wait, what can you do? Like I just couldn't multitask to the point where I could do it.
Yeah.
And that's a little bit my problem, but
Yeah. Well, and that's a super valid reason not to. And even, a YouTuber like Pontypants is one that I'm a big fan of. I just think it's not very practical to always be keeping on a YouTube schedule and doing game dev. So I think it's okay. And I mean, he's a great example. He made his game, did his full devlog. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but
oh yeah.
yeah. So he did his game and was very faithful to his devlog for Punch a Bunch, his first game, and then went dark for like a year, and then just posted a trailer which got like 1 million views and was very successful. And so I think there's lots of ways to be successful as game dev YouTube. And so I hope your channel, YouTube will treat it kindly on your return.
Yeah.
Do you
this Friday? So we'll see you very soon.
Okay, exciting. Well, I'll be sure to tune in to get you one of those views.
Sweet, thank you.
What is the experience like? Not that project in particular, but just doing contract work in general. Has it been a helpful experience to grow as a solo developer?
Yeah, I think overall it's a big confidence booster when somebody is like willing to offer you money for what you're doing and to do it for them. That's a lot of people can say, "Oh, you're doing such a good job, sweetie," but when somebody is like, "I'm willing to part with my cold hard cash in exchange for your services," that means you're probably doing something right. So that's cool. It's also a great opportunity, like I said, to learn new skills, to approach new game designs that I wouldn't have if I was only working on my project. And of course, all of that feeds back into my own stuff. I can even experiment with things like different code architectures and stuff like that. See how I like an event-based system versus a component, or there's just so many ways to set everything up, and you can't truly say one is better for you than another without having experimented with it.
Yeah. Do you think there's a world for a solo developer that, let's say they're working just a day job that they want to get rid of? Could they replace the contract or replace the day job with the contract work and have time for their own projects? Or, based on your experience being very busy, is it more realistic to just say, this is sort of a replacement income, but I'm not going to do a lot of work on my own projects, but I will build my skill set?
For me, it would have been extremely hard to work on that game and work on my own. I tend to have to go kind of full bore into whatever my main thing is at the time. And I think that's the best way for me to work. It might not be the best way for everybody to work, but I do think that game development is particularly momentum based, in that when you're in a project, you wake up, you're in that project, you go to bed, you wake up again, you're in that project, you have all this knowledge of how everything is connected to everything else. And so you can just more quickly fly to that thing. So it may be somebody with a different brain. I think I've heard Jonas Tyroler say, like, he like goes day, like different projects. Mm-hmm. That's just not how my brain works. Sure. So
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Do you think it will help you or hurt you coming back to Disinherited after so much time? Or maybe you're experiencing that already if you're back in there.
I think it will help me because, for one thing, multiplayers, it's so different. It's so much more cumbersome, in my opinion, to test, to do everything. It just takes so much longer. You've got to get multiple devices, or you're doing it on different platforms, and you're just like, it's such a headache. I'm going to feel like a weight has been lifted returning to my lovely single player experience. And I genuinely think that I've just gotten a lot faster and have a lot more experience. So I'm just so ready. I've been like champing at the bit to get back to it.
Yeah. In your time away from Disinherited, were you having ideas and inspiration bubble up, or were you so locked into the other project that the creativity was going towards that?
I think some things were able to sort of percolate more, because when you're in the development zone, especially when you're trying to release a video every week, it's just like there's hardly any time to think about the big picture. You're just like, I'm waking up, I got to do 5 pieces of art and I've got to implement them today or the next day, and then I've got to do this next thing. You're just very focused on what's right in front of you, and that's great because it moves you forward, but it doesn't leave a whole lot of room to dream about what it could be. And I think some of the narrative things have really come together in just like getting a little distance from it and thinking about like, oh, what is that relationship between this character and that character like? How can I connect the world better? What grand ideas are bubbling up in the stew from this? So I think it is helpful to take some space, but I would rather not have had to do that, to be honest.
Sure. I'm excited to see what comes out of the percolation. One of those super random questions I wanted to ask is just what's it like being on Blackthorn Prod's Pass the Game challenge, which to me seems like an insane endeavor to take on.
I love Pass the Games. I've done a number of them for Blackthorn. I've done a couple of them for Lazy T as well recently. I think it's such a fun experience to just get to dip into a project. You get a lot because it's so different than what you've been working on, or you get to start a shiny new thing and then hand it off into the abyss. Like it's not like some projects you start them and it's like, uh-oh, I'm married to this until it is done. But with those, it's just like, here's a week, do what you can, enjoy it. And that's so fun to me. You just contribute what you can. I think the secret to those is like also just going with the flow and whatever inspires you about the project. You just try to make that come to life, figure out what it wants to be, and then you let it be. You release it into the void.
Yeah. Of the past the games you've been on, was there any in particular that the output really surprised you where it ended up?
I think the first one that I started, it was like a chess minesweeper variant where the pieces moved in real time, and it was a little bit of a strategy puzzle game where you were trying to lure the king to a goal without him blowing himself up. And I did not know at all how that one was going to go over. It was a really complicated game to start with, and I thought I was just amazed at how far the other devs were able to take that one. It looked totally transformed. It sounded awesome. Like that was so fun to see where that one came from. And it had the most devs after me to it had 5 whole devs after me. So I was like, it came a long ways.
Yeah, I think I caught that one. I think I watched that one. It was just the concept was pretty out there because it's like not a standard idea. And so it's just so impressive to see people pull it together and make something playable and fun. Are there any topics that I have not asked you about that you either have, you think, a unique perspective on, or just something that you'd like to talk about?
There's nothing that's like burning a hole in my brain right now. You kind of got some of the things that I was thinking about with like the how to start and how to go about this. Those are things that have been weighing on me recently. So
okay, perfect. Well, in that case, I have made this podcast, and I'm calling it the Dev Dream Podcast because I want to inspire myself. I'm a person that's given up on making games twice. Making games is hard. But I'm in a place where I want to keep making games. I'm feeling really good about it. One of the ways I'm doing that is just by hearing what other developers do. This conversation has been a big part of that. But what would you say in this season of life, Dryden, is your dream in terms of game dev?
My dream is to complete this project that I'm working on and release it and have my first full released game. And that will be something that's so special for me because it's like, this is my whole vision. I've realized it to the best of my ability. Here it is, y'all. That's been the whole purpose of all of this. So when I get there, dream accomplished.
Yeah. Do you have any expectations for Disinherited in terms of a particular number of people playing it or monetary goals, or is it really just more creating the thing that I'm proud of?
I don't think I have any hard goals for numbers. Uh, if I'm happy with the end result, I will be happy, regardless of how many people play it. Of course, I really would like to have the amount that I make from it be able to give me the time to make another game. But we'll just see where it goes, because you're setting yourself up for disappointment if you're ever saying, I won't be happy unless I get 100,000 players.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, hey, thank you so much for joining me for this chat. It's been a real pleasure. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, I appreciate you inviting me on. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.